All right, so here we are in another one of our activities that we have. So in this one, it's called, we're calling it a dice game, and this is one that a friend shared with me, and I thought it was really interesting one to try out with some Python and some graphing as well. So the idea is that the user, so you, who's playing this game, will get to pick the number of dice, and you're going to roll those dice, or virtually you're going to roll those dice, and then remove any of the sixes that are found within there. You're going to take note of the number of remaining dice, and then roll the remaining dice and repeat this process until there's no dice left. So repeat the process as in um, roll those that are left, remove any of the sixes, and note the remaining dice. And so I tried to make a little visual here. So we're going to start off with a bunch of dice. So in this example, we're starting off with 7 dice. We're going to roll them, or we're first going to sort of like assign them to 0. So this is, we're going to create something that will hold our dice. We're going to assign them a value of 0. We're going to roll the dice. And so randomly rolling all of the dice that are in this little holder. And then if there's a 6, so here we have a 6, here we have a 6, here we have a 6, we're going to remove those. And so you'll see that this 2 will go here, the 5 will go here. So we just sort of shift over our little holder, and then we're taking note of that. So we started off, we have 7 dice at the beginning, and then we roll it, and then we only have 4 dice left, and then we would roll this again, and then depending on how many 6s, we would remove those. All right, so hopefully that sort of makes sense in terms of how we're going to, or what the goal of this particular project is. So we're going to hop back over to our Python programming environment. We're going to create a new project. This is untitled, so let's just maybe call this dice game. And now we can start programming. So the first thing that we're going to do in this case is we're going to make up that little holder. So again, that little diagram, we had that holder. And we're going to call that game A. And that holder in programming is called an array. And so that array we're going to use, and we don't know how long it is yet, but we're gonna have that holder ready to go. So hold the dice for the starting round. And we're actually going to make it dice. We're going to make it so that we can have, 5 dice for this activity, 100 dice, 1,000 dice, and that sort of thing. And so that's why I'm going to create a variable called dice. And so right now I'm just going to start it off with 10, but we're going to change that later on in our program to make it so that we can actually have it. The user will have an input on this, and so the number of dice that we will throw. And then because we also have sort of round 1 and round 2, we're going to need to have another holder. So I'm just going to call this game B. So second holder. And you'll see why in a few minutes why we have this second holder. All right, so the first thing is to take our game A and to fill it up with some holding positions. And so again, to fill up something or to do something over a few times or a bunch of times, it's always best to do that with a loop. and so we're going to do that here. And we're just going to use the append method with this. And so again, just to remind ourselves that a method allows us to fill this up. Or it's something, it's a little piece of code, so this dot append is related to an array, and it allows us to add something on the very end of it. So add 0 to the very end of the array. Now, the one thing that's always nice to do in this case is to let's see what happened here. We haven't ran our code yet, and so it's always nice every so often to run your code, see what's happening. So I'm going to run my code, and we should see, and we do see. So we run this 10 times. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we see that we have 10, so an array, or that placeholder for all of our dice, and we have 10 of them in there. So that's great. So we now see success in that. So the next thing we need to do is we need to sort of keep track of, well, what round it is. So again, like if we started off with this 7, that's our first round, or our 0th round, and then this is our second round and our third round, and those sort of things, as so on and so forth until we have no more 6s left. And so we have to sort of keep track of some of these things. So the first one that we're going to keep track of is a list of the non-6 values. And so these are the values of the non-6 numbers from each round. We're also going to keep track of the number of rounds, so that we know where we are, and if we need to refer to that, it's always nice to have some of these values as well. The number of rounds. And then also we want to know what the exact turn we are on. And so the first thing that we can do is, well, our non-6 numbers, we start off with the starting number of what we started with. And so what I mean by that is we started with 10 dice, and so this non-6 numbers, well, we can say that our first non-6 number is 10. We've like 0 rolls is where we're sort of starting at. And so we're just going to add that in there. And there we go. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go through and we want to make our this first game A, we want to make all those numbers random. All right. So we can go through here and say, so for X in range dice, game A, X equals random dot rand int, and we're going to go from 1 to 6. Okay, so again, that's our rolling the dice to give all random numbers. Now, because we're using this rand int, we need to tell our program that we're going to use that. So we're going to need to do that right at the beginning here, and we're going to say, again, we need to import those libraries. There's certain libraries, there's certain information that we can use, but in this case, we need to have to bring that in here. And so now what we can do, again, to keep track of what's going on, it's always nice to print these things out. So we're going to print out what game A looks like now. So if I run that, there we go. So we have this one, we started off with zeros, and then we ran that first time, and what it did, so this, again, just changes them all to be random integers between 1 and 6. And so we printed that out. That looks great. So now what we're going to start to do is do a comparison between, well, is this 6? Is this 6? Is this 6? Is this 6? And if it is equal to 6, we're going to eliminate it. But if it's not, then we're going to transfer it over to this game B. That's the way that I sort of figured it out based on what we were doing with this. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to have another for loop here. So for x in range. Again, we're dealing with dice. And so now we're going to have this comparison. So if game A X, right? So again, that X is sort of walking us through each one of these dice in that placeholder. If it's not equal to 6, then we can move it over to the other one. It just makes it easier than saying, well, if it's equal to 6, then eliminate it or skip it. So we just go through and we are going to move it if it's not equal to the 6. So a little bit of sneakiness on this one. I think it's anyway. All right, so we've got append, and we're going to append that value, so which is game A X into game B. So again, let's print out, at this point, let's print out, we just printed out what game A is, so let's print out what game B is, and then we can compare them. See how they both look. Now, this, we're not going to see these same numbers because I'm going to run this program new every time, so it's going to change. But we can see now we've got this one, so again, 10 new numbers. We see a 6 here, we see a 6 here, and so as we come along here, we see that now things are shifted over and we eliminate 2 6s. So that's good. So that's wonderful. The next thing we need to do now is to figure out, well, this game B, how long is that value, or how long is that placeholder or that array, and put that into our non-6. Because really what we want is this, we want to keep track of our non-6 and our rounds, because that's what we're going to have a little graph that is going to show us as it goes down or whatever happens. And so now we need to start to keep track of those sorts of things. So we can go in here and we can add in to our non-6. So non-6 dot append. So again, we're going to place this on the end, and we're going to tell it to grab the length of game B. Right? So again, that placeholder for the second one. So if we were to output this, that print non-6, that first value should be 10, and then the second value should be dependent on this one here. Now again, if I run it, we're going to see some different values. Yeah, so the first time we run it, we only have 1 6. So this one is 10, this one is 9. So now our values are 10 and 9 that go into non-6. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. I need to add in a little bit more comments in here. So we only want the numbers that are not equal to 6, and then move those. All right. And most of the time when we have these prints are just to help us along. We can get rid of those every so often. So now we don't need to have this one anymore, but it's good to have these other ones as well. And so then the next thing that we need to do is sort of like, because we're going to do this over and over and over again, and we don't know how many times we're going to need to do this, it's better to take what's in game B, move it over to game A, and then we can sort of run this whole thing again. We can randomize the numbers. We can say whatever's not 6, move it to B. We can print out B, and then we can add that length here. And so we can go ahead and do that. There's going to be a couple things to do. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to erase what's in game A. So we'll clear that out. So that will eliminate what's in there. And then we're going to move what's in game B over to game A. So again, the reason for that is if we just run back here. So this is game A and this is game B. So we moved it over here, and then now in our next round, we're going to call this one game A, and then we're going to have another one that's empty. It's called game B. And again, I have a supporting document if hopefully that will make a little bit more sense as we go through here. So we're going to move the stuff over. So we're going to have for x in range. And again, we only need to do this for length of game B. And so we'll start moving those over. Should have put this one up here. There we go. All right, so we'll start to move those things over. So we got game A dot append game B dot pop 0. And that should work. And so what this does is it takes the first value and puts it as the last value of this, but we know that once we've done this one, it clears out clears this out, so there's nothing in game A anymore. And so this is the action of moving the dice into the back into that first holder. And then what we want to do is part of this we want to make we want to keep track of the number of rounds that we're dealing with, and so we're going to say rounds dot append turns, and we're going to say our turns is equal to turns. So the original value of turns, which was 0 at the beginning, and then we're going to add 1 to it. So every time we move along, we're going to have this number of turns. All right. So if we run this now, it's only going to go through this once, but let's just print out at the end here what game A will look like. I'm just copying and pasting it, make it a little easier for myself. What game B will look like. What non-6 will look like. And what rounds will look like. All right, so let's run that. All right, so we've got here, so we started off with our 10, We had 6, 6, 6, so we had 3 6s, so we had 10 and 7. That's good. And then so now we took our next one, we converted it. So that was our game A, and then game B, and then this is our non-6. And then now this is what we have as our game A, game B. So we've moved what was in B over to A, and then B is ready. So we're ready to like roll the dice, move them over, and then we can start adding to this stuff again. And this is the number of rounds that we've done. So what we can do now is actually make this a little bit easier for us, because we want to essentially do this is until there's no more dice left. And so what we can do is we can just do this until the length of game A is 0. And so we can do that for all of this right here pretty well. And so we should be able to, I wonder if we can just move this over. Sometimes you can just move it over. I can't remember if we can do that here. Okay, insert cells, no. If I just do this and press tab, perfect. So yeah, I just selected it all, I pressed tabbed. So now what I want to do is say while the length of game A is not equal to 0, do this stuff. Now the one thing we need to update here is we have dice and dice. Well, dice is always going to stay the same here. And so what we need to do is we need to have a way of keeping track of the length of our stuff as we go through here. And so I'm going to add in another length, and the length is going to be of game A as we go through this. And so I'm just going to update this here and here, and that should work. So if I run that, let's see if we get an error. So it's going to run it a whole bunch of times, and we can start to see as we go through here. So there's our first round. We had 2 more 6s come through here, so we lose 2 more. So we had 10 in the first round. And then so we had a 6 and a 6, so we lost 2, so that's 8. And then we move those ones into the next one, roll the dice. We see that there's a 6 and the 6, so we now are down to 6. We roll again. There was no 6s, which is probable. It's allowed to happen. So it's 6 again. We roll it again. We have 1, so it's down to 5. Roll again, 0, so it's a 5. So as you can see, we're starting to have this sort of pattern as we come along and as it grows. And so as we come along, so 1, 1, and then this 4, and now as we get down to here, that's where we're getting to be like, okay, it's 0, and then so that's because I'm printing out print here, and then those last 4 lines are, this is what game A looks like, that's game B, this is what our non-6 looks like, and then that's our number of rounds. All right, so starting to come along. Now what we just need to do is plot this. This will look a lot nicer, a lot cleaner than looking at these numbers like this. And so what we need to do first when we plot something is we need to tell it that, oh, we're going to plot it. So we need to get that import math plot lib.py plot as plot. And then at the bottom down here, so we don't need to have these ones. We can if we want, but I'm just going to comment them out. And I'm going to comment this, this, and this, just to clean it up a little bit, clean the output up. And then now I can start to write in the plotting things that I need. So we're going to need a figure. There we go. Oh, figure. And now let's start to identify or start to define some of these things. So fig dot add axis. And then we're going to have this as a scatter plot. It'll look nice as a scatter plot. And we're going to plot the rounds versus the non-6. And let's make it red. Now, if you want to have a different color, you just can change the, I would invite you to explore with that. And then we are going to, it's always nice to label our axes. So we're going to label the x-axis, number of rounds, and the y-axis, the number of dice remaining. Remaining dice. And then the last thing is to set the title of this, because a dice game, and then we want to show that. And so the way to do that is just plt.show. All right, let's run this and see what we get. Oh, we got an error. So why do we have an error? Could be, I think something has to do with the number of things that we have. I think there was one line that I forgot to write in. We didn't add that last number of turns in there. No, or I'm spelling something wrong. Okay, I found it. It was actually this line right here. I wrote it, and it should be right in line with the 4. So it goes through here. That's to move it through, and then we add the number of rounds and the number of turns. So that was my mistake on that one. It was because it's looking at rounds and non-6, and they should have the same number in there, but it had too many. And so now we can see this nice plot in here. So as this comes along, you can see, and then it gets to like the last one, and it has like a whole bunch of, it's got one dice left, and you keep rolling it, and it never gets to be a 6. And so what we can do now is, originally we had 10 dice. Let's change that to 100. And now you can see a nice, cool looking curve here. So the one thing that I wanted to show you as like a neat little extension or a neat little activity that we can add on to this is by taking this dice right here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to comment it out. And I am going to, I think if I do that, insert cell above. And so what I want to do here is I'm going to have dice is equal to an integer, but I want to have an input from the user. I want to ask them how many dice will be in the game. So I want to have them of that ability to actually interact with the game a little bit. And so here I can put in 250, run that one, and now I need to click on this and run it. And now I have 250, and you'll see this nice looking curve there. All right, so that is it for this particular activity. I know it was a little bit more complex than one of the other ones that we did, but hopefully it will bring some cool insights, some cool ideas to what we did, and it sort of gets you into using some more coding with Python in in data science and in using it in data science. So again, I want to thank you for following along. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And if you had success with this, please feel free to reach out. Let me know that it was successful. Let me know if there was any other errors that you saw. I will be posting a link to I'll write up a lesson plan, or I have written up a lesson plan um, with the code in it, with some ideas, so that you can follow along with that. All right. Thanks very much for watching, and happy coding.